Welcome back to Papa Todd. Appreciate you being here. Really want you to think about when the unexpected hits you. Are you ready, right? In the last one, I talked a little bit about how this takes two different approaches. One of them would be more of your survive in place, and the other one would be a bug out situation. And as I mentioned, there are a number of things you're going to have to prepare yourself for either one of those situations. And that's what we're going to go over today. So obviously we want to be prepared, right? Now that's not just the Boy Scouts of America slogan. We want to take it to the next level. Well, you need to start with our physical and our mental state as well as our awareness levels. And so a number of things that we can do to enhance our physical and mental capacity. Obviously, exercise is a big one. That helps both. So getting in some kind of regiment where you feel like, I'm spending X number of days working my way up to getting better and better at being more physical, better exercises, flexibility, those kinds of things are huge. And obviously recovery from those types of things is important. And that goes as far as saying relaxation. Relaxation can do a lot for you mentally, obviously. Supplementation is also another big one, right? Sometimes we may be a little bit lacking, if we had some blood work done and we know where we need to focus. That might be vitamins, that might be creatine, things like that to help you get a little bit better in shape as you're trying to work your way up. So that obviously nutrition is a big part of that as well. So good nutrition, good supplementation goes right along with a good game plan to get your physical aptitude up. But another really important one is going to be a de-stress mechanism. A lot of people meditate. Meditation and prayer are two key aspects to keeping yourself well balanced in that, right? A huge factor in this is sleep, not only in the preparation side of it, but even in a survival situation. It's really difficult sometimes to get good sleep. So just to give you an idea of how it affects you, the number of hours that you go beyond a 24-hour period without good, consistent sleep is going to have an impact very similar to alcohol. So your effectiveness after 20 days of limited sleep is going to be basically, let's say you had 7 hours on average, you'd probably be operating at about a 98 percentile. Research tells us that if you get down to six hours in a 24-hour time frame, you're probably at 50% of your overall capabilities. That's a significant reduction. And just reducing it one more hour to 5 hours of sleep after a 24-hour period, and you're about 28% productivity. So you're almost being cut in half every time, every hour you lose. So think about it. If you only got 4 hours of sleep after a 24-hour time frame, you've got about 15% of effectiveness working. So how that really affects you, it's legally drunk, I believe, is 0.09% blood alcohol level. And after 24 hours, that's what you're going to experience. The same thing as legally drunk driving. You go another 48 hours without any sleep, and you're at 0.15. So significant increase. What that does really ultimately is your mental reaction time, your immune system, your stress level, and your judgment is going to be impaired significantly. So keeping your mind in a good state is extremely, extremely important. So going back to the awareness, another really key factor in our mental capacity. In preparation for, whatever the event might be, I'm hoping you're keeping up on lots of things. That could be news, and I know, especially the last 5-10 years, it's been really hard to watch news. But at least knowing a few things that are going on is extremely important. Another aspect of that's going to be weather. If we're talking about blizzards and earthquakes, floods, things like that, we need to be keeping an eye on the weather, what major events are coming. Hurricanes, obviously, things like that. We know that, those types of things, we got to be ahead of it, right? But also our awareness needs to be a kind of a subconscious level. How can we improve our subconscious level? Start listening to ourselves a little bit more, that gut feeling. Don't ignore those kinds of things, right? So all of these are warnings. And sometimes our very first instinct is to create some false sense of security to ourselves, right? We hear ourselves making assumptions, right? That it can't happen here, or that couldn't happen to me. And those things kind of lull you into an unprepared situation. Sometimes we're just afraid to face it, right? And we need to face it, at least a little bit, one step at a time, if we can. And that starts with a pretty simple statement to yourself. What if? What if it does happen here? What if it does happen to me? So this is really about situational awareness. This is about asking yourself some readiness, questions, because readiness really does require you to stop and think, not to freeze, but stop and think. What if? Okay, what if something happens, whatever that thing is, and you got to think through that process, right? What have I done to learn more about that thing, whatever that is? How can I learn more? Can I put my mind to this and work my way through it? I have a previous video talks about the fear of the wilderness and how the wilderness can scare you, right? A lot of different things out there that you're not aware of, right? But once you become aware of it, your fear starts to subside. So that's a very important part of crisis response that keeps you from freezing. You're going to be able to say, nope, I know what's happening and I know what we need to do next. That's a big deal. But you also have to prioritize these things. And it's a little bit different in an urban situation than it would be in a survival situation. Not a lot, but enough. And the reason I mention that is because the very first thing typically in a wilderness situation is going to be shelter. But we need to put one more in front of that if it's an urban survival situation, and that's air. We got to be able to breathe, right? There are some events that happen that are catastrophic events that might affect our breath. And so we need to prepare for those things. Is that volcano situation? Is it, the air is just dirty? Is it something that's, a dirty bomb situation? Those kinds of things we need to be prepared for, right? That's number one. Number two is shelter. And we'll go into videos, deep dive on some of these here. But again, this is just on mentally getting yourself prepared for these things and kind of starting to get organized a little bit. So air, shelter, because we can die quickly from hypothermia. Water, obviously we can die sooner from water than we can from food. And then we've got fire or energy, which is another big one. In a home, obviously we're not going to create an open fire in our house. We shouldn't. So what forms of energy are we prepared to have inside our home if we have to survive in place? And then lastly, food, long-term food storage or short-term food storage, depending on your bug out situation or survive in place situation, have the right amount accordingly. So when we look at these priorities challenge here, we really need to recognize a few things. And it's a struggle for some people. It really is. When you start to realize that certain things are no longer important in these particular situations, things that you really thought were important, you start to filter those out really, really quickly. No longer do those possessions that you had become as important to your situation. So it's really important. Probably the biggest tool you have is your survival instinct, your mind. And so it's important to prepare your body and your mind for these things. I'll leave you with this. You need to be able to remind yourself that your attitude can turn a crisis into either a burden or a challenge. It's really up to you and what level of preparation you're willing to go through. So next one's going to be on air and shelter. We're going to talk a little bit about how that air can impact your survival, as well as how to turn your home into a shelter that's efficient and much more comfortable than you could ever imagine. So I look forward to seeing you again. I appreciate you being here and hanging in there this long. We'll see you next time.